my daughter was your typical little girl. She was developing normally. She was talking. We did make a joke how well her appetite was. We would make a joke and say, wow, this kid would eat anything if it wasn't tied down to the table. And then she went for her MMR vaccine a week after her first birthday. And that night she spiked a very high fever, and we called the pediatrician. The pediatrician told us that that was normal, just to give her Tylenol. Tylenol would bring the fever down. And as an autism mom now, I know that that was probably the worst thing that you could do for your child, was to give them Tylenol. But you know, you trust your pediatrician, and you trust that, you know, you're going to make the right decision. And so we did as we were told. We give her Tylenol. The fever did come down, but within the next day, it's like one child left me and then another child came into my home. She was having these really bad tantrums that day. I just assumed that she was still sick. Took her to the pediatrician. She said she was fine. And then the next week or so, my husband said, has she talked any this week? And I said, no, she hasn't. And he said, something's going on. And she stopped eating. Like, it was all that we could do maybe to get like some crackers in her. She started having explosive diarrhea. Took her to the pediatrician. She just said, oh, it's a viral infection. She'll fight it off. And she said, I understand your concern. She's not talking, but don't worry. All children, some children just talk later in life. I said, well, what you don't understand is she was talking, and now she stopped. She was eating, and now she stopped. Like, what is going on here? Well, then it just, you know, she couldn't give me any answers at the time. So then later on, she was around 18 months old, and I was noticing some of my other friends that had children at the same age, like Samantha just wasn't developing like they were. Like, for instance, just even with like fine motor stuff. I remember like one child was just, we were somewhere and they were out to eat and they were eating a sandwich and they were just holding the sandwich kind of like you and I would hold a sandwich. And I was like, how do you get your kid to do that? Like, Sammy can't do that. She can't hold a sandwich. She was like, oh, I don't know, you know, my kid just does that. And so at that time, I told the pediatrician, I was like, I don't know, something's going on here. And she said, well, I don't really see anything, but you know, you're her mom. You're with her longer than I am. I'm only with her for 10 minutes. But yet someone that's with my child for 10 minutes can make a decision about my child. So at that time, she referred me to a child development center, and then there is when I got her diagnosis of having autism.
And what's the video? Show us the video that you're going to show us.
Okay, so this is Sammy. This was a video taken a week before her first birthday and before she was vaccinated.
Wow, what a sweet. How old is she now?
She's 13 now.
And so what's this vaccine done to her? What's it taken away from her life?
It's just taken away from her life all the normal activities that every 13-year-old does, you know? For instance, I remember it's been maybe like 2 years ago, I think all the middle schools in my hometown, they were having their first dance, and you know, everyone was taking pictures of their daughter, their son, saying, you know, that they were kind of bittersweet that they were growing up and they were having their first dance, you know. And here my daughter was out on the trampoline singing something about little Einsteins or something to that effect, you know, something that a 2-year-old would do. You know, it just, her whole life she's going to have around the hour care. I mean, she can't be left alone. So as a mother, you know, I'll never get to experience that first dance. I'll never get to experience prom. And what hurts the most is I know that I'll never get to experience a wedding. So, I mean, it breaks your heart that not only my daughter's affected by this, but millions are affected by this. And when you try to tell your story, you know, people just overpass it, or when you try to educate families about not to vaccinate or maybe to spread the vaccines out, they just look at you like you're some hippie and like you just, you know, you're just anti-vaccine, and that's not it. You know, like, I really want to like help children because of what has happened to my daughter. Like, I don't want anyone to ever experience that. And like all these parents, my biggest fear is what's going to happen to Samantha when my husband and I pass away. I can only hope and pray that there's a poly place in our area. You just never know what that means to me when I see those videos and I see, you know, you guys, like for instance, I think there was one video one time where like Kent had to turn the light off 3 or 4 times before he went to bed. If my daughter was in a mental institution, you know, they would give her some sedative because she went off, and it's just a simple little thing that they have, you know, for instance, you know, just maybe turn the light off 3 or 4 times just soothes them, you know. And Polly, I could just never thank you guys enough for what you're doing for our children, for everyone else's children, just giving up your lives just to do this. And I just want to say thank you so much.
You've been in this game for a long time.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
you've been fighting, and you've been there. I've seen you at all the conferences. I've seen you supporting people on Facebook and all the things you're doing. You're in this fight. You don't need to thank us. We're all part of the same fight.
I know.
And it's getting better. It's better than it was then because we didn't have things like Periscope and, you know, ways to get out to the world. But people are hearing us now. This is it. This is everything you've been fighting for. And I hear you with your daughters. They're vulnerable, and we've got to take care of it. But we're as committed to taking care of the kids that are damaged as we are stopping it. All right. So we thank you for all you've done, and keep being that bubbly, happy face on Facebook, because I love it. I love it. You're always there. You're like the first one the whole time. So you need to make Norlina your friend. If you want some bubbly, happy comments on your Facebook page, then this is your girl, because she never stops. She's always smiling.